I'm overwhelmed. I can't
Yeah.
do this because of XYZ.
Yeah, you're gonna think I'm the worst client ever. Like, I'm sorry. Like, they have people almost like,
Yeah,
feeling guilty if they don't do that. It's like, you don't get me wrong, you are there as a source of accountability, but accountability just doesn't mean point and
hmm,
condemn or
exactly.
condescend. Don't do this. Why do this? It's, dude, we're on the same side of the fence here. Work with me
Yeah,
here.
we're on the same team. I'm going to help you to work through this for sure. Yeah, that's super important. I think that's a big misconception that a lot of people have, especially if they're thinking about working with someone in some capacity, especially like a personal trainer or someone like yourself or someone like me, that they think that it's going to be this is all your fault, and as you said, pointing the finger and
Yeah.
shouting abuse and stuff like that. And unfortunately, the reason that a lot of people have that kind of perception is because that's how they've been treated in the past from maybe colleagues in work, their teachers in school. I had one client recently join up, and I can't remember the exact words, but she was basically telling me that she was working with this guy, and around Christmas time, I'll have to paraphrase, but he basically said something along the lines of, "You don't want to be fat for the rest of your life," but he had a few curse words in there as well, and something like really demeaning and like horrible. And she was telling me that as soon as that happened, she was like, "Okay, I think we'll have to finish it up." And I was like, that was I'm not that surprised, but it's such an unprofessional thing to do, and so like not the right way to go about it. Because as you said, like when you're working with someone as a coach, we're on the same team. I'm here to help you to work through this difficult period, whether it's you're busy with your kids or busy with work or whatever it may be, and we're there as a helping hand to give you that support, not to point the finger. So yeah, I think it's an important thing to address because would you say you've talked to a lot of people who have that similar kind of perception of like what accountability looks like?
Yeah, 100%. And don't get me wrong, like that is a tactic that can work, but it'll only work with a certain demographic of people, and
Yeah.
it's not something I'd ever recommend. Like, you can focus on moving away from pain or towards pleasure, as the saying goes. I always focus on towards pleasure. Sometimes away from pain can be a good motivator, but it's the way in which you do it. You can tell someone to this or that to that, or you can, find another way to tell them, the pain is coming up. You can say that. You can just give examples. They might talk of, like, medical conditions, and then you can just say, well, do you want to feel this way forever? Is this something you want to move away from? Sounds like this brings you a lot of pain. Instead of saying, yeah, you're this, you're this, you're that. Like, do you want to be like that forever? Like, there's a very subtle way in which you can have the exact same effect without need to be a dickhead, essentially. And that's kind of why, like, I don't consider myself, you're probably the same, like a personal trainer anymore.
No.
We're kind of like holistic coaches. That's kind of the way I describe it. Like, and I think once you take a holistic approach, there's no going back. You're never going to go back to just going through. You can still train people in person, because I'm like yourself. We both love movement, and we'll still get a kick out of training people. But that's like a smaller part of what we do.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think just going back to that point about, people who are like, it's like the carrot or stick analogy.
Yeah.
So people who use the stick to beat people, uh, that is a strategy that can work. But in my experience, it's very short-sighted because you can only keep beating somebody for so long, and they might stick to whatever you're giving them training wise or food wise for 6 months or a year or 2 years, but eventually then it becomes unsustainable. And then they end up really not enjoying what they're doing. They end up hating it. They end up not liking that person, obviously, because they're super mean to them. And then they end up just going back into old habits. And then that puts them in that yo-yo cycle of now feeling even more demotivated because they've gone through this really stressful time. And then all the results that they might have got, they may be, if someone wanted to lose, like, let's say 20 pounds or 2 dress sizes, they lost it and then they gained it back and then some because of now all that extra stress on the nervous system and just a traumatic experience in general. So it's not a good strategy at all.
Yeah, I think coaches don't realize the trauma that they can inflict
Mm,
on their clients. Like, I know you mentioned the carrot and stick there. Like, when some people's like, well, I don't want the carrot. It's like, there's nothing wrong with the carrot. It's just you don't have the person hungry enough yet. You don't have them in a position where they believe they can go to where not the grass is greener. The grass is greenest where you water, as they say, but they can go to that positive future. And maybe the image of where you're telling them or towards pleasure just isn't crystal clear enough for them to go, yeah, that's somewhere I can go to. Because if you go to someone who's had years of trauma and years of, people telling her the word list and to say, oh, there's a time, not too far from now where you don't feel this way. They'll say that doesn't motivate me because I can't see myself being that person. But if you work on a lot of state change, and I do a little bit of hypnosis and we do all that stuff where we just basically, in other words, it's like a form of guided meditation. If I was in person with someone, you can do a little bit more stuff. But that's fine. You can really do a lot of belief change there. And then they go, you know what? Yeah, that's something I can be. Tony's awesome at it again. Tony's awesome. But I think that's a good point.
He's a master.
People don't realize that, like I think coaches, coaches don't realize like the person that they're getting is that turns up to them is a multifaceted being. Of course they have goals, but they also have their traumas, their history, everything that's made them who they are. And I'm not saying as a coach you need to work through all of them with someone. That's not our job, but our job is to be aware to the best of our abilities